Okay, guys, we're going to try this again. I had my mic muted and I didn't have my chat opened up here, so I couldn't see that people were saying, hey, we can't hear you. I hope you can hear me this time because I want to answer these 3 questions that I was very eager to dive into a little bit of it. So to start over again, one of the questions was somebody asked, are there different social profiles among people with ASD level 1? And generally speaking, I would say yes. There is the person that we would just say he has or she has limited social motivation. So this is the person that finds objects, facts, figures, ideas, non-social, non-emotional tasks very interesting, much more interesting than people. And so the person that gets lost in engineering, computer programming, and other things for extended periods of time and can hyper focus on that for extended periods of time has limited social motivation. I'm not saying that he or she is antisocial. So hope that answers that question. The second type of individual is socially motivated, but they have difficulty reading social cues. So they tend to miss facial cues, body language, tone of voice, and so on. So they are very social, and they freely dive into social conversations and whatnot, but they're a bit clumsy, and they're kind of unaware of how they're interacting with others. But they push forward anyway. And the individual who is a little socially awkward but also socially motivated can come off, can be viewed as being somewhat intrusive or boring or annoying or overbearing. And then we could also say a third and final general type of ASD level 1 individual might be the masker or the social chameleon. So these people, they are socially motivated, and they're aware of the fact that they're missing social cues, that they're not picking up on some of the subtleties that would make them more compatible with neurotypicals. And so they kind of analyze and adapt themselves to fit different situations and to fit in with different groups. They go, okay, well, these people are talking about this and they're behaving this way, and they can zone in and kind of mimic, for lack of a better term, what's going on around them. Can you guys hear me? Okay. Just type yes if you can hear me. Okay. I'm going to assume that you can. Yes, finally got it. Thank you. Thanks, guys. The other question was, and this is a really cool question. So anyway, let me summarize the first thing. The question was, are there different social profiles among people with ASD level 1? So in summary, what I just said, there's ones with limited social motivation. They prefer non-social tasks, objects, things, rather than people. They're not antisocial personality disorder or something like that. You have the person who is very socially motivated, but they lack social awareness and some social skills. And then you have the chameleon, we will say, who can do an analysis and kind of fit in very well. And females on the autism spectrum are much better with that than males. The other cool question was the difference between schizoid personality disorder and ASD level 1. And as some of you may know, there's a huge overlap there. So with the person on the autism spectrum, they may be socially motivated, but they kind of struggle feeling capable in initiating and maintaining friendships. They feel incapable of having discussions outside of their special interest and engaging in group activities where people are talking about idle chit chat and emotions and whatnot. In contrast, the schizoid personality disorder individual doesn't experience social motivation at all. Okay, so you could think of people with schizoid personality disorder as being affected by differences in social motivation, whereas those with ASD are more affected by differences in social skills or capacity. So, does that make sense? So, the ASD individual is socially motivated, but struggles with social skills. Person with schizoid personality disorder doesn't have any interest in, they prefer solitary activities and isolating. But there's some commonalities, though. Both groups experience emotional intimacy as intrusive, especially when discussions of feelings enters into the picture. Both ASD level 1 and schizoid personality disorder people experience others' emotions as overwhelming, especially negative emotions. Many people with ASD level 1 absorb the negative emotions of those around them. And this can contribute to the ASD individual's desire to withdraw or be alone. Whereas people with schizoid personality disorder are known to have a flat affect and restricted range of motion and are not overwhelmed by others' emotions because they're not engaged emotionally at all. It's very common, although some neurotypical spouses might find this hard to believe, that the ASD individual as a child was very empathic and picked up on others' emotions too easily. And it was just too painful for that child to feel other people's pain. And so that child with ASD, whether he knew he had ASD level 1 or not, learned to choke his emotions off at the neck. So now in adulthood, gets in a marriage situation and he appears as if he doesn't care about another person's feelings. I would say also that people with ASD level 1 and schizoid personality disorder, both of them tend to crave a lot of alone time. Both may experience difficulties with motivation. For the autistic individual, it's often related to having an interest-based nervous system, we will say. Contrast with that with the person with schizoid personality disorder and the fact that he or she lacks motivation socially has to do with anhedonia and a general tendency to receive less pleasure from social activities. Okay, so the autistic, it's not that he doesn't like to socialize. He prefers to socialize when there's shared interests involved. Person with schizoid personality disorder doesn't derive any pleasure from social interaction. So let's see. I guess we could say that people with schizoid personality disorder experience limited to no pleasure when socializing. And we could also say that autistic people receive little to no pleasure socializing when it comes to small talk. If you have ASD level 1, you can connect very deeply and for a long periods of time when you're talking with someone and they share your interests. Okay, I probably over-answered that question. And then the other cool question that I got that I want to answer is, this one has to do with the similarities and differences between ASD level 1 and narcissistic personality disorder. So there's just like schizoid personality disorder, there's a huge overlap between ASD and NPD. So some of the differences would be a person with ASD has restricted and repetitive behaviors, where the person with narcissistic personality disorder doesn't really have a restricted doesn't really engage in restricted or repetitive behaviors. So there's two different things right there. If you have an ASD level 1 spouse, for example, and he seems to be very rigid and loves routine and structure, that's not a narcissist trait. Many people with narcissism and autism are described as lacking empathy, but people with ASD appear to lack empathy or not listen due to challenges with social interactions, especially with nonverbal communication. Whereas people with narcissistic personality disorder, they're too focused on themselves to listen or empathize with others. That's two completely different things. Another one might be that people with NPD are often preoccupied with fantasies, especially concerning themselves, whereas autistic individuals are more likely preoccupied with objects, parts of objects, and their special interests. I would say also that an autistic individual could appear arrogant or egocentric. That's true. But that usually happens because he or she is trying to compensate for challenges that they have socially. Whereas someone with NPD may appear this way because they're unwilling or unable to empathize. They feel superior to others. They take advantage of others. They take advantage of situations to fulfill their own needs. They're very selfish for reasons unlike an ASD level 1 person would appear selfish. Okay, those are the three questions that I wanted to answer. And I thought I'd just do it here in the video instead of doing it piecemeal. I'm looking at the chat. See if there's any questions in here. Let's see. KC Angle 78. My husband attended your most recent masterclass. Thank you. He no longer thinks the problem is just my imagination. Oh, well, that's great. I'm the third. Reading about psychology and body language was always a special interest. I'm a chameleon indeed. I always felt like a chameleon studying people. That's a skill. Sometimes it's a skill that can be overused, but you don't want to just throw that in the trash. Curious about attachment styles related to ASD. Let's cover that in another video. That's going to be another good question to answer. Attachment styles. Yeah, I'll make note of that. NNYLASOR. I wish my husband would be more open to learning as much about himself as I have learned, as well as attempt to understand that empathy can be practiced, but I also don't want him to fake or mask it. Have him join my men's Q&A group, and then once he's completed that, he can move on to the men's masterclass, which KS Angle 78, her husband did that. I'm interested with how ASD overlap with CPTSD as well. That's another great question. We'll do another live on that. So, okay. So we'll wrap up now. I know that was short and sweet. And sorry about the audio earlier. So I think I want to summarize these three questions. I hope this isn't redundant. With respect to the different social profiles among people with ASD, there's the one with limited social motivation. There's the one that is highly motivated, but there's kind of socially awkward. And then there's the social chameleon. The summary for schizoid personality disorder would be both groups have a problem with closeness. They kind of view closeness as intrusion. Both groups, both the ASD level 1 and the schizoid personality disorder, are easily overwhelmed by emotions. They have a high need for low time. They have motivation difficulties, and they have limited social pleasure. So it's easy to mistakenly think that the ASD level 1 individual is also schizoid. And the summary for ASD versus narcissistic personality disorder is the ASD individual has restricted and repetitive behaviors. The narcissist does not. The narcissist and the autistic both look like they lack empathy, but people with ASD supposedly lack empathy because their social skills and emotional intelligence is low. People with NPD lack empathy because they're more focused on themselves. People with NPD are preoccupied with fantasies about themselves. Autistics are not. And an autistic person can appear arrogant, but again, that's because he's trying to compensate for feeling socially inferior, whereas the NPD individual feels socially superior. So that's the big summary of the difference there. All right, guys. Hope I didn't over-explain that. Thank you, and we'll sign off for now. And there's two other great questions buried in the chat over there that I'll talk about in the near future. Thanks, guys.